All right, so a quick recap of the previous video where I talked about buying a couple of Apoc knives after being very impressed with the quality of their tactical swords, though recognizing that I would probably be expecting some issues with fit, finish, comfort, and handling, but things that I could fix. So basically buying a couple of knives with the intent of needing to do some out-of-the-box customizing to make them suit me. And the first one we looked at was the Wayward Camper, which is a pretty straightforward utility outdoors knife, and the result was pretty nice. I didn't have to do a lot to it. What was the second knife that I bought? The Trench Bowie. And yeah, I think this one's going to need a lot of work. All right, before we get to the blade, let's take a quick look at the scabbard. Again, nothing surprising. Very similar to the butterfly swords, very similar to the Wayward Camper. You've got the flat plastic sheath with a lot of different mounting options. It feels a little slightly more flimsy than the other ones. Got the same kind of mounting for a strap here it's pretty stiff and has the snap and the Velcro, so you can put it over your belt without having to take your belt off. That's nice. Got the same two kind of floppy extra safety retention straps that actually get in the way more than they're useful. And the retention is exactly the same as the other knives because, well, the grip scales, as we'll see, is exactly the same as the other knives, which means the retention is based on how this front hook of the grip fits into the scabbard. Now, as I've mentioned in other reviews of Apoc products, I tend to expect out of the box this sheath retention is going to be insanely tight. It's going to be a massive struggle. I'm going to need to adjust it by adjusting the shape of the scales and how that hook fits in there. Now, I also mentioned in both the butterfly swords and the Wayward Camper that with this hook here, my trick for releasing the knife most effectively is not to do it the same way I would do with a similar cold steel Securix sheath, which would be to grip and press my thumb on the back, because if I do that, it does tend to drive the hook in there. But as you've seen, the retention isn't nearly as snug as expected. So I don't really necessarily have to do the trick where I use my index finger to press at the top to release. Now, it's in there enough to be safe, but comes free with just a gentle tug. Also, because those retention straps are up a little higher than they are on the Wayward Camper, they don't tend to get tangled into the sheath as much on resheathing, so that's an improvement. So it's a functional sheath. I don't think I'm going to have to do much in the way of any kind of adjustment to it. Let's talk about the knife itself. All right, let's try the out-of-the-box cut tests. Again, I don't necessarily have a whole lot of faith in this edge or the kind of sticky bindiness of the finish. Now let's try paper first. All right, like the other one, a little toothy. Could certainly be improved. How about some cardboard? Okay, not horrible, but definitely needs some improvement. All right, let's talk about specs and out-of-the-box impressions of fit, finish, and handling before we start talking about, well, what's going on down here. And I'll also try not to be terribly American by giving you the metric as well as the imperial units. And that means I'm probably going to keep glancing down at my notes because the metric is still not very natural to me. I'm practicing. I'm also going to be making a lot of comparisons between this knife and the Apoc butterfly swords. And it was the butterfly swords that inspired me to take a chance on this and see what I could do with it, because I really like these. Now, you're certainly going to see that the butterfly swords, the blade is about 1.5 inches longer and it's wider. But let's talk about the weight. 19 ounces, both of them the same weight, about 540 grams. And I think that's because there's more beef in this blade in terms of the profile, but also the butterfly swords, you only have the half scale on here, the one side, so you get that extra G10 scale, so that's probably adding a little bit of mass in there. It also puts the point of balance just right exactly at the guard. But let's talk about those other specs. Shorter than the butterfly sword, yes, the blade length is 9 inches, which is 22.5 centimeters. Overall length is 14.25 inches, 36 centimeters approximately. Width of the squarest part of the blade down here, the widest part is 1.5 inches, about 3.75 centimeters. Width at the spine, there is distal taper the way the blade is shaped. So down here is the thickest part of the spine, that is 3/16 of an inch or 5 millimeters thick. So a little thinner than the Wayward Camper, but similar to the butterfly swords. All right. Now, one flaw I wanted to point out to begin with, the one glaring one I've noticed in terms of the finish, let's see if I can get you to see it, and I'll try to get a close-up of it. You can see it right here. Catch it in the light. The spot right here on the blade on one side that looks like it's been chewed on. I don't know how deep that goes yet, so I'm probably going to try to polish it out. Like I said, I'm going to smooth the surface a little bit so it's not quite so grippy in cutting through binding materials. And yeah, I'm going to redo the edge. Like the Wayward Camper, there is a weird kind of back hook guard here that, yeah, I think that can be improved or removed entirely, not sure yet. There is a nice swedge on the back edge. It's not sharpened on the back edge, but it gives it a pretty nice blade shape. So that was one of the reasons this appealed to me. So a knife I could potentially do something with, but we'll get to that in a second. Grips, exact same G10 scales as the butterfly swords, the Wayward Camper. Pretty much all of the knives in their line use the same G10 scales with the same 3-screw retention. Now I will take the scales off and take a picture of it. I suspect, just like the butterfly swords, it will be full tang, not skeletonized under there, which explains why there's a lot of weight down here. You've also got that really weird slotting in there. There's some styrofoam left over. You can see wedged in there for the lanyard hole, which is, for whatever reason, recessed. I don't know why they didn't just drill a hole through, which solved my mystery of why it was kind of lopsided on the butterfly swords, where it went through the side on the inside and the bottom on the outs. Well, yeah. Again, they're just using the same templates and the same grips. All right, the G10 scales, yeah, they're rounded on the sides, but they are kind of stout and they have some uncomfortable corners and edges. But I think, again, the biggest glaring issue with these is we do have to talk about this business. Now, I do like a D-guard. I also have come to really like sub-hilts, which this kind of functions as. But as is, well, let's just talk a little bit about handling and other concerns, and, well, probably the biggest change I intend to make to it. All right, anybody watch enough of my videos to recognize Stab Him, my thrusting pel? Layers of heavy cardboard reinforced by a whole lot of compressed paper, and there's even some wood in there. So it gives me a really good resistant target, which actually also makes a pretty decent makiwara pad. But something I can thrust into that gives me a lot of resistance but doesn't mess up my blades and has replaceable surfaces. But we got to talk about the concept of D-guards and sub-hilts briefly. Now, I promise I do intend to get back to the topic of the sub-hilt. I got off track here, but the delay has allowed me more time to experiment with them. And also the more time I've been training in HEMA with swords that are designed to finger the guard, basically have a finger over the top of the quillin, yeah, that tends to make this make a lot more sense and feel a lot more natural in hand. Now in the reverse grip, I will admit that, yeah, it's a little bit more in the way than it's worth. But in the forward grip, not so bad for certain kinds of things that we'll talk about in future videos. You could also argue it might give you a little bit better grip retention, especially in situations of having to withdraw a stuck blade, which for me includes withdrawing a blade from a stubborn sheath when I'm drawing it. Yeah, that can certainly give you a better grip and pull. But what about the D-guards? As I've worked with the Bok Cham Dao, the butterfly swords, I've really come to appreciate these again. They give me a lot of hand protection, especially as I've been doing HEMA cross training and using swords like this, knives like this, as my offhand weapon. Gives me a good parrying short blade dagger that still has good hand protection. It's still pretty portable. Doesn't really get in the way. It's not very cumbersome. Does it make a good impact tool? A knuckle duster? Well, because this one has that half cut in the grip, it doesn't want to twist in my hand when I do that. I can do it, I can hit with it, but it's not the most comfortable or confidence-inspiring thing. We'll talk a little bit more about knuckle dusters because, well, we have to. All right, this kind of has the features of both a D-guard and kind of a sub-hilt with that ring in there, right? But out of the box, does it do any of them well? All right, I haven't really tried this. It'll be out of the box live pressure testing. How's it feel to hit something with this? Something resistant, but not absolutely rock solid. Okay, I felt a little bit of a bite here between my fingers and a lot of bit of a bite in these sharp grip edges into the palm of my hand. That'll probably change as I reshape stuff. What about that ice pick grip? Which, yeah, feels really, really unnatural between the shape of the grip and having that ring through my lower two fingers. It doesn't feel right at all. But what happens when I hit stuff? Okay, not as bad of a bite between my fingers, but yeah, that corner into the palm of the hand is not friendly. What about thrusting and stabbing? Let's try a basic hammer grip stab. I don't want to do much more of that because, yeah, definite bite here into the side of my finger. Lots of sharp corners and it's very narrow. And yeah, actually the top corners here, biting into the web of my hand. Not nice. And what about ice pick? It doesn't feel very natural at all. Not as bad with the ring. I'm still getting some of it, but again, yeah, I'm not feeling comfortable with those edges on the grip. What about something a little bit more in line with the hand thrust oriented? Go with that saber grip. Okay, that's a little better, but it doesn't take much of that to throw, again, my middle finger up into that ring. So I'm going to have to do something about the sharp corners on the grip and the inside edges of the guard. But we definitely have to talk about the outside edges of the guard, all those fun little points there, because, yeah, we're talking basically something that is designed to be, and is clearly, a knuckle duster, which in many places is, well, illegal to possess, or at least illegal to carry, and even in places where it might be questionably variably legal to carry, using one in a self-defense situation is probably going to get you a lot of negative legal attention. So, definitely going to redo the edge, do a little repolishing on the finish, take off a couple of the unhappy corners here, make it more comfortable in my hand, see what I can do with that. It's going to be a bit bigger challenge than some of the other knives because I've got more edges to work with. All right, I'm gonna need to do something to make this a lot less felony edgelord, and I'm not sure what that is yet, but let's see what I can do. All right, welcome back. It's been 3 days, for me anyway. And a lot of that, as expected, was because, yes, it did take quite a bit of work on my grinders and sanders to remove a significant amount of steel and then do the refinishing. And when I was done, I went back out a few more times because I didn't feel that I was done. Fine-tuning as I tried handling the thing and looking at it and deciding where I wanted it to go, what I wanted it to be, and I may not be done yet. But where am I at this point? All right. Now a couple things off the bat. You can see that the finish is a little bit more satiny than it was, and I did root profile the edge. The result on that is, yeah, a knife that is more slicey, a little less toothy, and hopefully doesn't bind as much in materials like cardboard. Okay, and we'll do performance tests later. But obviously the biggest change is going to be down this end, the guard. Turned it into kind of a D-guard with a little bit of a beak, and in the handling section next I'll talk about why. Rounded it off so it doesn't have so many square edges on it. Also rounded off all of the unfriendly edges inside where my hand contacts, and then did significantly reshape the grips to fit my hand. And we'll talk about how that works in handling as well. The last thing I did, and this is one of the parts I'm not quite sure I'm done with, is instead of taking that back guard hook off entirely, I kind of crafted it into a little bit of a catch hook. And well, we'll take a look at how useful that might be, and probably isn't. But let's go ahead and take a look at handling. All right, handling feels great, at least in my hand, which is what it's crafted for. Now, a little bit of a different perspective on the studio here, because I'm feeling a little lazy tonight and didn't feel like moving Stab him from his usual spot, which is right over here just off camera. So let's take a look at, well, any kickback in thrusting, stabbing, and punching. Starting with the hammer grip. Let me tell you, really good penetration, no kickback. Saber grip. Also very comfortable. Ice pick, which does, well, that ring is still in the way, but it does feel better in hand. Well, let's see how much it does. Pretty good. Punching. All right, that's in the reverse grip. Let's try the forward grip. Much better. Rounding the back of the grips made a huge improvement. Rounding the front of the grips, and especially that ring, made the rest of it. It feels really nice in hand and very well balanced. It moves really well. Now, being that it has a D-guard and something resembling a little hook, let me repeat some of those butterfly knife tests that I did, the Chom Dao butterfly sword tests. First of all, impact into the guard. Yeah, I can take that. Impact into kind of the top crook of the guard. That's nice. Now, there's nothing on the back that's going to stop something blunt like this. But let's talk about another blade. Can that hook catch something? Now, I've thought about putting even a deeper blade catching hook in there because there's steel enough to do that. I may still do that. But it does give me a little bit of retention this way. Would it give me any retention hooking back on the guard this way? Not much. Not much. And I thought about putting a little bit more of a hook here, but I figured it'd snag me more than anything else on a regular basis. Speaking of snagging, all right, there is a hook on the back of this blade. It will potentially stop and catch another incoming blade, but I don't think I would rely on it to do so. It's just too small. It would be kind of a happy accident if it did, but I feel like maybe it's better than nothing, so I'll leave it there for now, and I may change my mind about it over time. Speaking of having another weapon in my hand, though, one of the things I did buy this for was the potential of a companion sword, and yeah, this could be a really nice companion piece for my HEMA practice and my other crossover practice. If you are, for instance, a practitioner of eskrima, a spada y daga, yeah, that would be a great size blade to do that with, and it offers you a decent amount of hand protection. So yeah, I kind of like the possibilities of what something like this might be able to do. Yeah, so I'm thinking I'm pretty pleased with, well, making the choice to purchase this thing and the changes I've made with it so far. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video on the Wayward Camper, the weather really not cooperating with me. It's like 4 o'clock now. It is dark. It's been dark and rainy all day. It's been that way since it transitioned from summer into, well, whatever this is. I'm hoping to get a break in the weather. I'll come up with some performance tests like I did for the trio of Apoc tactical swords, and probably compare at least the Wayward Camper against some of its more popular and higher price competition. But until then, well, let's get our conversation going in the comments. If you have any questions about this knife or what I've done to it and how I did it, we can talk about that. Any other thoughts on what I've done? What do you think of it? You like it, dislike it? Should I have gotten rid of the D card entirely? That was another choice that I didn't decide to go with. But as always, until next time, thanks for watching, following, subscribing, liking the videos, adding to our conversation in the comments, and I do hope to see you back for, well, the next part of this little series.